Good afternoon and welcome to the All Energy Decarbonised webinar series. I am Peter Blore, the event director for All Energy, and I would like to start proceedings by thanking everyone who has joined us today for this session on business case for smart, sustainable city solutions, no more pilots. This session is being held in partnership with Microsoft and follows this morning's excellent session on smart, sustainable cities, learnings from Sharing Cities project as part 2. So thank you to Microsoft for partnering with us, especially to James Lockyer for driving the content, who joins us in the panel once again this afternoon. Prior to the session, I would like to provide some housekeeping notes. I encourage everyone in the audience to interact with our speakers as much as possible. You can do that via voting in the polls and asking live questions. If you're watching the session in full screen mode, you will need to minimize your screen to vote in the polls. And to provide our team with feedback, please rate this session in the tab below and insert your comments alongside your rating. In the webinar series thus far, we have achieved over 10,500 registrations, which is tremendous support from the industry. So thank you for your ongoing support. We also have 2 additional sessions tomorrow. So if you wish to join us then, please view the sessions on our webinar channel and register as soon as possible. So thank you everyone for joining us. Enjoy the content, interact with our fabulous speakers, and we look forward to seeing many of you tomorrow as well. I will now hand you over to Clare Foster, a partner and head of clean energy at Shepherd and Wedderburn, who will chair this session and introduce our other 5 speakers. We are hugely thankful to Clare and her team at Shepherd and Wedderburn, who are headline sponsors of All Energy Decarbonised, for their continued support and involvement in the 2 sessions today. Thank you, Clare.
Peter, thank you for the kind introduction. Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this afternoon's session on smart, sustainable cities, no more pilots. And to those who were good enough to tune in to our morning session, then welcome back for the second instalment. As you've heard, my name's Clare Foster. I'm partner at law firm Shepherd and Wedderburn, and I head up our clean energy practice at the firm. I also have the pleasure of being your chairperson this afternoon, so I'll try and keep things on track. For those of you who were unable to join us this morning, we heard about the Sharing Cities programme, which seeks to develop affordable, integrated, commercial scale, smart city solutions with a high market potential. We also heard about the benefits of urban data platforms and how data can be collated and presented back to cities so they can maximise and leverage the best outcomes from their decisions. This afternoon is a continuation on that journey, where we discussed the need to move away from disaggregated small pilot projects where there seems to be a perpetual reinvention of the wheel, and the need to accelerate moves towards a dynamic, collaborative approach, taking the best of learning to date with a view to deploying at scale. And this is all set in the context of the net zero targets of 2050, passed into law by UK government as the target for achieving net zero greenhouse gas emissions, and 2045, the equivalent Scottish state. It's also set in the context of certain cities, Glasgow and Edinburgh included, each of whom has set even more ambitious targets of carbon neutrality or net zero by 2030. Now, if we have any chance of reaching those targets, then we need to move away from the pilot phase into the deployment phase, and we need to do that now. The coronavirus has highlighted the ability of central banks, governments, and agencies in multiple jurisdictions to move quickly, demonstrating that their inherent bureaucracy need not be a barrier to dynamic action when faced with an emergency of this scale. So why are we not treating climate change like the pandemic? Climate change presents a much bigger existential threat. For cities looking at their smart sustainability plans, the arguments from moving away from pilot projects and embarking on a dynamic journey which fosters the best collaborative approach is incontrovertible. Now, this brings me to the panel waiting patiently to share their thoughts with you as to what and how we can do better. I'll give very brief intros for each of our panel members, as I know you have access to their biographies online. So please, may I introduce James Lockyer. James has worked in the software industry for over 20 years and has spent the last 15 years at Microsoft. He's currently responsible for leading industry-focused Internet of Things sales and marketing efforts in the EMEA region, and has a passion for smart cities and places, as well as energy verticals. Jason Warwick is a highly experienced smart city technology leader and strategist and CTO for Urban Integrated UK. Jason has deep experience in technology transformation in government and cities with technical expertise in smart city, M2M and IoT technologies. I then introduce you to Gary Bennett. Gary is a strategic thought leader who joined Urbis Schrader in November 2018 as MD, responsible for developing and executing the evolution of external LED lighting to a citywide digital lighting platform. Next up will be Giordano Ambrosi, marketing manager at Intercomp SPA, who looks after corporate media communication. Giordano will be speaking to us about the social, economic, and environmental benefits of smart parking system. And last but not least is Andrew Dyke. Andrew is Director of Intelligent Buildings at Iconics UK and has a passion for digitising the built environment. He believes that every building can focus on user-centric design, people productivity, and optimised operational performance with data at its core. I, for one, am looking forward to hearing why we must move away from pilot projects and ideas on how to tackle the particular challenges facing cities, how we can stop different cities trying to achieve sustainable outcomes independently of one another, and in doing so, just not learning best practice from others. How best can cities move the dial on decarbonisation and sustainability by collaborating and by using data and technology to its best advantage? Now, I've asked each of the speakers to give a short presentation with their preliminary thoughts. Please, panel, keep to time. And then the plan is to launch into our Q&A session where I challenge you to ask some questions to get the debate going. I'm not proposing to speak in between presentations in the interest of maximising the time for our panel members, and so we can get to the Q&A and the meat of this more quickly. And with that in mind, please can I ask you to send through your questions so that we can launch straight into the Q&A session when the presentations are over. And now if I can hand over to James Lockyer of Microsoft to kick off proceedings. James.
Great, thank you very much, Claire. I shall just flip the slides into presenter mode and then we can get started. Great stuff. So thank you, Claire, and good afternoon, everybody. As Claire mentioned, I work within Microsoft's Internet of Things business, and we work with organizations to help them leverage the Internet of Things and the resulting data collected to really see what is happening in specific scenarios they are focused on, to help them understand causes and impacts, to help predict what will happen, and take action with real-time data-driven responses. For this afternoon session, we're going to share a little bit more around the Internet of Things and the link to sustainability. We will then also provide a little bit of a brief background into our partner ecosystems as a tee up to then move into some more specific sessions on smart and sustainable smart city solutions. So thinking about sustainability, first of all, you may have seen the announcements that Microsoft have made this year in relation to our environmental priorities. For example, in January, we announced that by 2030, Microsoft will be carbon negative, and that by 2050, we will remove carbon from, we will remove from the environment all the carbon the company has emitted, either directly or by electrical consumption, since it was founded in 1975. And just this month, we announced Microsoft will replenish more water than it consumes by 2030. We are talking about smart and sustainable solutions for smart cities this afternoon. And if we look specifically at the 4 priority scenarios that we're focusing on as an organization, we have a number of IoT, data, and artificial intelligence use cases. To help really try and highlight some of the work we're doing with our strategic partners, I wanted to pick on one of these use cases, in this instance around building energy management as an example. Andy will be speaking later on this afternoon from Iconics, and we'll go into a lot more detail around all the different aspects of building energy management and intelligent buildings. But for example, why are we picking on building energy management? Well, first of all, we know that research has shown that buildings contribute to 40% of energy consumption worldwide. But secondary to that we also know that this, of course, will have a direct impact on increasing CO2 emissions. So naturally, there are cost savings as a result of leveraging smart building technologies. But if we think about more around some of those concepts, really what we're talking about here is building management systems, not only looking at energy management, but access control, safety and security, building information management. But really, when we think about what are the impacts and the benefits there, we are really talking about the fact that we know that not only through the feedback from our partners around the solutions that they're deploying today, but also from our own experience, because within Microsoft, we've deployed the Iconics technology on our campus in the US in Redmond. We are absolutely seeing savings, in fact, over and above 20% from deploying those technologies. And fundamentally, what we're talking about there is really taking millions of real-time transactions a day and using analysis of those to help improve processes and drive down consumption of energy. And this is achieved through leveraging systems and services within our Azure Cloud platform, but also within our Azure IoT platform and our analytics and artificial intelligence services. If we strip that right back, though, what we're talking about here are IoT concepts, and essentially we talk about it in the elements of things collecting data and ultimately taking insights from that data and then really defining what you then do with those insights in terms of actions. So if we think about some real world examples here, what we're really talking about, if we pick on something like streetlights as an example, when you have smart connected streetlights with perhaps air quality sensors installed on them, we're then able to very quickly, through leveraging some of those cloud and IoT services and machine learning and AI capabilities, to very quickly get a much better view on air pollution data, for example, in a city. And hypothetically, perhaps taking those examples of the air pollution data and using that to make better data-driven urban planning decisions. So when we think about the evolution of IoT solutions today, we're really moving from a world of connected assets into connected environments and connected ecosystems. And really, data, analytics, artificial intelligence, and cognitive services are helping us to enable that transition. Very closely related to that, our focus from an Internet of Things perspective is really looking at how we are driving innovation from cloud to the edge. We announced just over 2 years ago now that we are making a $5 billion investment in IoT over 5 years to really help simplify aspects such as operations around IoT and how to better secure endpoints and how to truly leverage artificial intelligence and cognitive services right on the edge, as well as elements such as modeling physical worlds digitally through concepts such as digital twins. None of this would be possible, though, without our partner ecosystem. So we are delighted to be joined by a number of speakers today. And to give you an example of really the partner ecosystem and the momentum that we have in this space, we have around 10,000 partners today that are very active, working with us across many different aspects of IoT deployments. And so we really cannot do any of the work we do today without those important strategic partnerships. So with that, I would really encourage you to sit back and listen, but also engage with the presentations this afternoon. And we're really hoping that you'll find this session valuable in terms of understanding what types of solutions and concepts you can consider adopting to help you meet your smart city and sustainability solution goals. So with that, I will stop there and I shall hand over to Jason. Thank you.
James. Let me do the technical thing. Brilliant. Okay. So, if you didn't get a chance to attend this morning's session, I spoke about my experience on the Sharing Cities project, which was a large project across London, Lisbon, and Berlin. And I think the key takeaways and link to this presentation is that during Sharing Cities, we demonstrated the value case and the technology for a number of common measures, from smart lampposts and lightings, shared EVs and shared bikes, through to energy and building retrofit. But the thing that connected all of those different sensors, those different devices, the IoT landscape, is the data. And No More Pilots is the title of this section, because we've done the pilots. Lots of cities have done pilots in these technologies. I know that Glasgow and Edinburgh have done many. The Sharing cities have done several. So how do we move from pilot to scale? Now I'm going to focus on the data platform side of things. That was the aspect of Sharing Cities which I was responsible for, and not surprisingly, I'm going to talk about the data platform here. So what to look for in an urban sharing or an urban data or a smart city platform, and how do we go from a rapid startup? So one of the learnings that we had in Sharing Cities was to start with a small pilot that can be funded and for which there is a business case. Now this might be a district level smart lighting project, it could be a smart parking project, it could be an air quality project, but one for which there can be funding can be found. So again, it's very difficult to make a business case and to find funding for a city to invest in a data sharing platform for the whole city. So start small, scale up on a technology that is proven. So from that pilot, the advice is to invest in a scalable urban platform to create a capability that can be then built upon by subsequent projects, which again, a smart city is all about connecting different types of sensors together to create those new insights that are actionable. So we often refer to the data that comes from those different devices as raw data. It's an oversimplification, but by merging and fusing that data with other data sources, be they other sources from other devices, could it be from existing data such as information about residents and GIS data, you can create that smart data, which you can then use in different ways. And visualization is a common way in terms of reports and dashboards, but others is to create action. So you create that capability, and you can then look to scale that with follow-on projects. So when you look at that data platform, what kind of characteristics are you looking for? So support of open standards is important. Security these days is obviously key. The scalable cloud infrastructure, Microsoft Azure is our platform of choice. Vendor locking should be avoided wherever possible. Again, many entrants into this market now are taking a very open approach, and there are some EU standards that can give some direction to that. But scalability isn't just about infrastructure capability, it's also a capacity and cost issue. So flexible models, pay monthly, pay yearly, pay in accordance with scale, or even CapEx models are available and should be looked at depending on really your city or your project priorities. On the right there's a brief summary of visualization of our Urban Pulse platform, which is quite typical of many approaches, in that there's a layer we call Urban Pulse that deals with data coming in real time. It's stored, it's analyzed, and then can be presented out through our visualization tool, which we call the cockpit. On this next slide, we see a couple of examples of the cockpit in the dashboard. So on the top there, we see a typical representation. Each of those squares, we call them tiles, refers to a generator of a different data source. And then you can determine what data sources you'd like to see shown on your map display, again, which creates some valuable insight, but also enables a city to manage, to be empowered by use of their data. And again, a common approach in our approach is that the data always belongs to the city. This is a set of tools that enables cities managers to manage their data, manage the devices that connect to their data, and create value for the city. So a little bit more about the Urban Pulse. Again, one of the key learnings is to make the city platform easy to understand and easy to consume for a city. There's lots of products in the market. In sharing cities, there were 3 different solutions that made up sharing cities. And that was a cause of some confusion, particularly in terms of scaling. So an open and modular approach: start small, scale up, ensure that there is end-to-end security. Things generally communicate via APIs, and for Urban Pulse, there's already quite a number that we have already integrated, and we have a number of tools around big data analytics, which can be employed all the way from standard analytics up to machine learning. And some hot news is that we put all this together in the last 6 months, and it's now available on the G Cloud for anyone that's interested in that kind of solution. I think I'm just about at my 8 minutes. Thank you, everyone. And I'm going to hand over now to Gary.
Great, many thanks, Jason. Good afternoon, everyone. So I think Jason raises some really interesting points there regarding pilots and just how we scale up. The approach that we've taken here at Schrader is really to think slightly differently, rather than to think about pilots, but to think more about the journey, and then actually what's the attributes of those pilots or the validation that's required by the city, and to create a model and to create something going forward that's more than just a business model, but it's a journey that allows that ability to be able to prove out the technology, but also to meet the sustainable requirements of that city going forward. So let me take you through a couple of the slides here. So the first one that I think everyone knows is, today we have a sort of simple purchase of spare contender, but in reality, the challenges of business models is huge. Do we go for razor blade? Do we go for pay-per-use? Do we go for subscription? And the problem is they actually all add such a complexity to the overall challenge of a pilot that when you look at a pilot, it's very well funded, it proves out a solution, but actually then when you try to roll it out, the reality is it's either generally very expensive or actually you can't get the return that you require in terms of justifying the funding. So really the reality is to look at something slightly different and sort of think about the way that if there's lots of installations going on, if there's lots of small pilots, if there's lots of small validation cases, how to bring those together to actually say that actually this shouldn't be about pilots, this should be about actually fulfilling spaces and filling application needs within the city to be able to achieve a greater flexibility, a greater agility, and really to provide something that's very actually aligned just to today's environment. So we know that the reality is the vision is we want a smart city. It should be quite straightforward. We have the technology. The reality is that the complexity is actually quite huge. So trying to bring all of those partners together to make them work together in an open way is things that Jason have been doing. We heard this morning with some of the things that Bill's doing as well. Kanos, and of course Microsoft's position in this in terms of helping us to be able to get that sort of unified infrastructure in place that we can actually work in an open network environment. But the real dilemma is, of course, the funding, and how do we then work on that funding, and how do we look at that funding justifying it? And the reality is when you look at pilots look really quite attractive in the short term, very small amounts of funding generally, 50, 60, 70,000 pounds. But actually the reality is when you start to scale those pilots, they actually are not there to solve a long-term strategy or a long-term journey. The reality of them is that they're just proving sequenced events of technology, not actually the longevity of that city's vision, and actually ensuring that step by step the pilots become something that's an ingrained solution within that environment. So we've looked at it slightly differently. We've created what we call logic. I can't show you the video, unfortunately, because I don't have enough time, but reach out to me. It's on YouTube. But with logic, the idea of it is that as we move from HID to LED, and now we move to DLP, a digital lighting platform, there's a circular, sustainable approach that we need to develop in our products has to be aligned to the city's journey. We just can't keep supplying product hoping that somehow it fits into the puzzle. And so what we've created is really a methodology, but also an approach to the market that says that we don't really need to do pilots, because in reality, we're actually doing solutions all the time. But maybe if we open those out to more partners, actually we could get more benefit for the city, more benefit for the citizen, excuse me, and more benefit for sustainability. So what we created is cities that people love to live in. And really, there's 4 key themes to cities that people love to live in. There's really the character. I mean, it could be the character of your city, the character of your space, the community. You know, is it a residential area? Is it a traffic area? Is it an area where we have to think about the elderly? Is there an air pollution issue? But the reality is, you can think about an opportunity within that environment as a community. How are we impacting the environment? Is there issues in terms of ecology? Is there things that we need to think about in terms of energy consumption? Dark skies, for example, and as we've seen in France, where law has now actually stepped in, and credit to the French government to actually step in and say, actually, we will now actually start to have open skies. We will start to actually dictate what will be then the standard for everybody to achieve, driving towards that environment, and of course, more importantly, towards our future. So these sort of 4 themes is how we sort of structure our business and how we sort of go to the cities in order to actually think about the characters and how we actually develop those. And creating that sort of journey and that economic value is really critical, because at the end of the day, cities are businesses in their own right. And it's important that what we think about is that pilots actually move beyond that. So if we think about the future and we think about engagement model, generally when you look at a pilot, it's really trying to solve that one technical problem. But the way we've come up with it is perhaps more of a dating process. If you look at it, is we really believe it's key to get a magnet in the business case. So we initially establish viability. We look at what's the connections, who are the stakeholders, is there the community that needs to be involved in that? We send out demonstration vans. We meet with lots of local residents to understand some of their concerns that we can share back with customers as much as we can share with local authorities. What's the gravity of the information to make sure that obviously the right information goes to the right points and the flow of that information is clean and crisp as well, so that we don't end up in a situation where we're sending information on copper piping to the chippy and wood to the plumber. The reality is we want to make sure that it's clean and crisp. Then prepare the platform key. The pilot really is a sort of toolbox to a certain extent, a sandbox, if you want to put it in that way. But we already have the technology, we're already deploying the technology, but actually it's about how we can open that technology to wider benefits. And that creates what we call the magnet. And the magnet really is a push and pull. It really allows us to push ideas from us and our partners into the pot to sort of say, well, this is where you can be today, but you can think about that for the future, and actually it doesn't cause a problem. Also to the fact that actually it allows the customer to pull us into their problems. And what it does, it then unlocks logical value, really creates a matchmaker. So we're fully aligned in the business case rather than trying to push technology over the line. And a good example of that, just quickly, is Olympic Way in Wembley. That really, this was about the community, about the character and the future. The community was really, there's lots of residents living there. They've got obviously Wembley Stadium on their doorstep, but also we don't want to lose the character of Wembley. So the lighting project here was about advertising, it was about safety, it was about security, but it was also about creating something for the future, that we had a scalable solution, but also could not then disturb the community, so therefore they can live in a comfortable way without actually being disturbed by bright lights, for argument's sake, but also keep the character of what Wembley's about and that experience and that performance. And then, of course, create that future that allows us to be able to take technology and actually evolve to moving those static banners to more digital technology, and there'll be large screens, etc., but also have the control in place to be able to do many other things. And that's it. And I'd like to now hand over to Giordano from Intercomp, who will take you through his deck. Thank you very much.
Okay. Hi, everyone. In just a second that I will turn a full screen mode. Hi, everyone, and thanks for the introduction, and thanks for the opportunity of bringing us here in such a rich panel discussion. With the following presentation, I would like to introduce you to our smart parking system solution And I'd like to share with you some achievements we have reached with the municipality in which we are working with. First of all, Smart Parking System is the division which was founded back in 2002 after a visionary thought from the founders, which have understood the rising needs of the new urban structure. It was necessary to develop a solution that could allow the administrations of the city to efficiently govern all of the activities connected to the parking on both executive and strategic level. Because cities are changing, people are as well, and new technologies are growing. So we need diverse approaches and type of interaction with public administrations and urban environment. So we have developed this structured answer divided by 3 phases. A data acquisition phase, which is made of all of the components are designed from our engineering team. And so we have the sensor and the camera, which allow us to detect the parking status, such as if a parking bay is occupied under violations or if there's a payment connected. Then we have the parking meter for traditional parking paying, and the mobile app, which it is integrated into the system. So it is not only used for parking paying, but it can allow users to be guided up to the parking bay, or even book eventually a specific parking place dedicated for loading, or unloading, or electric vehicle charging stations. So this, as it was described, is our perfect equilibrium among devices in order to obtain precise information. But when we have developed smart parking systems, we thought of it as an open system, though, in which we can interface with any other solution, as we have heard today. And as it is actually happening in some municipalities in which we are working, because we think we need to track all of the relevant event for the traffic connected to the parking. Then we have the data management phase, where all of these data are getting stored into an Azure cloud server and elaborated through our management software, which it shares it in real time with all of the people who take an active role in the parking processes. So administrator or management officers and users will receive personalized information based on their competences, so they can focus on specific actions or strategies. Then we have the analysis phase, which is made of all of this data coming from our devices and third-party tools, which is a vital step to understand how those actions and strategies ameliorated the viability and the traffic connected to the parking. So today, I would like to share with you the results we have achieved on the cases we have developed. And I would like to talk about Treviso Municipality, which is a city in the north of Italy, where we have an active implementation running from 2010 with the system we have just described. We summed up those benefits into 3 main categories, which are environmental benefits, revenue increase, and social virtuosity. Because with our solution, parking is now able to communicate all of the relevant events concerning the parking activities. In this way, we can shape the way drivers move toward the parking bay. So it is possible, for example, to identify the more or less used parking areas, encouraging specific urban areas, city categories, by differentiating the tariff according to the analysis which are carried out through the management software, balancing so the traffic connected to the parking. Besides, by using the app, users can be guided from a long distance toward the parking area, optimizing their journey from the beginning, reducing so the parking traffic that produces more than the 30% of the pollution produced by the urban traffic, according even to the recent research of the European Union. So, indeed, along with the Treviso Municipality, we have carried out a study analyzing the amount of carbon dioxide that we have cut down thanks to this strategic approach. The result is that we have cut down 4,000 tons per year. Yet, that 4,000 ton cut down is connected to a direct effect on the traffic reduction by parking optimizations. But there are many other indirect effects that are occurring once you optimize the traffic. That's why I would like to add also this other fact. In Treviso, they had a very critical problem connected to the usage of the parking areas, because as many Italian city center models, they were not organized for a massive democratic increase, and above all, massive car circulation. So, along with the on-street parking management, the municipality back in 2010 also planned to build up an off-street parking structure nearby the center, supposing that the parking problem was related with the lack of parking spaces. Well, after one single year of using our system, they realized that the off-street parking structure was no longer necessary, because the critical issue of the parking was solved only by using the technological strategy based on smart information. So, thanks to smart parking system, administrators could better use the information to guide the users directly toward the parking bay, and users, on the other hand, according to their interests, they could move and have a diversification of the tariff and availability according to real-time needs. Then, first of all, talking about economic aspects, I would dare to say that smart parking and parking management is a business, a very remunerative business if administrated wisely. As you can see, Treviso almost duplicated the parking revenues thanks to a smart management of the parking data that allow them to apply economic strategies over parking resources management, having now a notion of incentives to invest again into the city economy. And the economic increase goes together with the social virtuosity, because it is generated by a better service usage, as it shows these key indicators. Fine and penalty are not enforced, while the number of the ticketing are increasing because people realize the additional value of the solution. They use it more and they use it better. And above all, the municipality, by a better understanding of the usage data, could better balance the ticket fee, the average of the ticket fee, obtaining so economic, social, and environmental effects. The citizens perceive a good organization, recognizing the administration's closeness to their new ways of movement. Technological innovations and good administrations are urging virtuous behavior, following the idea that we can actually improve our urban area. In conclusion, I wanted to add that our solution, it is not a pilot, it is a ready-to-use solution. We have been implementing this since 2005, answering today's needs, as well as we're going to answer the necessity of tomorrow's. Thank you very much. I've finished and I hand over Andy Dyke. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Giordano. And hello to everyone. So yeah, my name's Andrew Dyke. I'm a director at Iconics UK, as Claire introduced earlier. Today, I'm going to talk on a slightly different tangent to the others that have just delivered a very interesting set of insight. And I'm going to focus a little bit more back to buildings within a city. So just to start off, to talk a little bit about Iconics, you know, we've got a pedigree of history going on about 40 years of working with clients to automate large-scale oil refineries, water systems, right the way down to the granularity of buildings, and then automating and helping optimize energy performance within buildings. So in terms of the concept of no more pilots, you know, we're leveraging a massive history here of experience in connecting to various data sources and driving efficiencies out. We've typically installed in over 50,000 buildings. James mentioned earlier about the project we did with Microsoft in their campus, which realized significant benefits, not only in energy performance, but in the operational teams delivering the operations of those buildings through the fact that we're able to use machine science to identify root cause analysis of issues, to correct issues and to optimize the way the systems ran from a HVAC performance in those buildings. And we'll talk a little bit more on that as I step through today. So we've developed at Iconics, we've looked at buildings in some detail and recognized so many repeatable scenarios. I foresee this happening in the smart cityscape in the future. Repeatable solutions. We've heard a lot today about lighting. We've heard about car parking and so on, energy performance, grid performance, demand load side. These are repeatable things that are occurring city to city. And to Claire's point, how do we prevent cities constantly inventing this from ground up? And if I talk today about some of the learnings that we've had and what we've done about this in buildings, because buildings in the same way are exactly the same. They all carry similar components, albeit it's a slightly different set of Lego bricks that make that building unique. It's exactly the same way that we are in a city. So we created data digital twin as a platform initially to replicate that building. And upon that data digital twin, we look to define the relationship between people, places, and the devices, and provide that sort of semantic data model from which we're able to deliver new outcomes. Now, in buildings, there's an element of legacy that has presented some interesting challenges along this journey. The fact that we design and build and have had over the years a variety of digitization in that process, from the actual design, moving into BIM models of late, but not all buildings, through to the process of which they're commissioned, the technologies that go in, and how the end users work within the handover of those properties. So from a design perspective, through the phases of construction and commissioning, digital has not really been leveraged to its best capability. Commissioning and witnessing HVAC performance at a 10% sample rather than using data to do 100% verification of system performance prior to handover. From a building technology perspective, installing HVAC or lighting, metering, access control systems, and so on, putting them in silos without considering the benefit or optimal performance capability by connecting it to a unified system. And then from an end user perspective, when we flip into an operational world, we've got loads of different operational teams that are very much siloed and are not using a common data model or processes necessarily to deliver the best outcomes. And that's the same, really. You can apply that to a city scenario. When we come back to looking at digitizing real estate, we always say digitize with purpose. So identifying firstly, what are we trying to achieve? And I think everyone's talked to the same scenario today. What are the use cases that we're trying to drive out? And commercial real estate, property owners and property managers are one of our personas and stakeholders who want to maximize their real estate value and their lease up performance of their building. And they want to minimize their operational cost and risk of redundancy of that building stock. But if I now wear the hat of the occupier and the tenant in the building, well, they have a different set of benefits they're trying to achieve. They're trying to maximize experience for their staff, maximize space utilization, maximize the safety in current light of COVID, and minimize staff attrition and downtime and operational cost within their building. Now, we dilute this down from our experience into 3 pots. One is, how am I driving things out for the users of a building and the productivity of who's inside a building? And that same thing can apply to people in a city. How can we drive operational excellence and efficiency from that common data model? And that comes down to all the services, from soft FM and cleaning functionalities to hard FM and the maintenance of capital asset plants. Same can be applied to cities in terms of distribution grids or transport systems and so on. And then from a management information perspective, how do we oversight this? How do we govern this? How do we ensure it's right? And how do we use this same data stock to really give us confidence that our service levels are correct and as expected? So from a building perspective, we look very closely at building a framework that supports a whole world of different user experience applications, that unifies experience and delivers that off of a common data model, whether that's mobile and fixed location user interfaces that are playful together, whether it's location contextual digital signage, flexible signage solutions that can pop up and change. We just heard from Shredder about the idea of having LED signage that can be triggered by events to give information to the users of a city. And an interactive kiosk when I want to engage with the occupants of a building and provide them information back. Now we're blending that in buildings from space availability, wayfinding, real-time data around space availability, but real-time data around sustainability, real-time data around air quality information, giving people choice. Do I want to sit somewhere that's warmer, cooler, or so on? And then from a management apps perspective, we look at, okay, well, we've given the light fluffy side of it, but now we really need to drive out some efficiencies. And who are the different users? We're user-centric again. We don't just bundle it all into one platform, assume everyone will go in there and drag their own value from that data. We drive the value out, and we provide very specific user interfaces for the different people engaging with that building stock. So whether that's the soft facilities team or the hard facilities management team, or a particular team that are looking at the utilization of their workspace or the sustainability of their building. And driving underneath these screens, we can apply machine science and machine learning now to the data sets that we have that really pull out those actionable insights. And to give you some examples of that, under hard facilities management, we apply fault detection and diagnostic algorithms and machine learning using the Azure stack and the Iconic stack blended together to deliver true insight to building performance, ironing out and calling out the call to action items so that things are addressed proactively rather than reactively or under planned maintenance. And all of those three outcomes are driven, as I've said, right the way through on that common data model. And on that common data model, we're connecting to building operational technologies such as BMS and lighting systems. And we're complementing that with IoT data, so additional sensors coming into the mix, and equally integrating to IT infrastructure and IT systems. So we build up that whole thing. James touched on this earlier about things. We develop a whole array of assets within our model. We define that to a spatial definition within space maps. We apply a semantic relationship model to those items, and then we can really drive out some operational excellence applying fault detection and diagnostics and machine learning. Equally, with that standard data model, we can now scale it up across portfolio. So, and this is where we start looking at the overlap here to smart cities. If we've got a standard model we're happy with that delivers those use cases, by now scaling it across our portfolio, we can see the whole performance capability in a linear relationship across that building stock. And of course, we can roll that model out across all different real estate sectors, whether that's residential, whether that's science and research, or commercial real estate. Just to give some real world examples at this stage, we have an installation in Deloitte's 1 New Street Square, which is a flagship intelligent building in London. 23 systems integrated, 250,000 data points every minute mapped through. We're driving out everything from visitor experience to employee experience to those back end hard FM, FDD and machine learning insights, optimizing that building performance. And we're optimizing user experience number 1 at air quality. We have AXA 22 Bishopsgate in London, where similarly we're driving out really complex insights across data sets to make sure the buildings are lean. When we look at it from a portfolio level, we're connecting buildings. It could be in different countries around the world. We're normalizing that data to create portfolio insight for our clients. But really, when we think about what that looks like, it's really the same as a smart city, although we're adding other different types of data sources into it. So it's all going to be about that semantic data model at the smart city level. And when we then consider how that might look as a smart city, we could be pulling together smart districts. We're seeing projects that are going through where we're applying, as per one of my next case examples, solutions that are looking at district systems within a city, connecting cities together, connecting infrastructure. We've had a number of talks today about using API and standard data models and data schemas to achieve that. It's all going to be about, though, for what agenda? And are we driving environmental? Are we driving urban planning? And getting the right data sources to come through. So back to my whole mantra of this thing about user-centric design is defining those objectives first and making sure we've got the right data model that supports it, and then feeding that data model with the data insights. So some further real-world examples, just to break this up. E.ON, this is over in Sweden, a little village called Simris. We were the back-end platform with Microsoft, integrating and controlling an off-grid concept whereby we had wind farm, PV, we did energy storage in the village by participating residents, and created this net zero village scenario that's localized. Nottingham City, they've got a smart energy system whereby we are looking at the control and rollout of one particular sector of it, where we're looking at a net zero arrangement of properties that again feed into this smart city arrangement. So my takeaway points today, and these are really echoed, I think, from the other presentation we've had, is, you know, digitize with purpose. Let's get that definition of what we're trying to achieve. We can roll this out to smart cities if the smart city environment can actually equally identify what the master plan is. What are we trying to do, and get that unification in place. Don't forget that people are a source of data as much as sensors. So how do we integrate the people into that environment? Plan for scale. We've heard this before. You know, there's no point looking at things that are isolated. We need to make sure we can scale it right the way up. But at the same note, to make it real, let's keep those sprints narrow. Let's build from best in class. We don't need to build from the ground up. You know, we've got a load of modularity and functionality that's available to help us do this. And avoid siloed solutions. Don't go gaining loads of data on one particular area and then realize you can't really expand that into other market sectors. And to my underlying point, ensure we're user-centric. Let's make sure the people are at the focus of everything that we're doing. So thank you. At that point, I'd like to hand back to Claire.
Brilliant, thank you, Andy. We've covered an enormous amount of ground in the last hour, from, you know, city sharing and IoT deployment to what we should be looking out for in terms of characteristics of projects which can be scaled, through to lighting, street parking and intelligent buildings, which is a topic in itself. I'm conscious of time, but very keen that we use this time to allow our audience to collate their thoughts and send through some questions. And in the meantime, I think we're keen to run a poll to get your input on views on certain things. I'm waiting for the information coming through to me. Okay, so the question is, considering the smart city solutions that the Sharing Cities initiative is prioritising, which scenarios are top of mind for you, the audience? And I think there are a number of options that you can vote for. I can't see those at the moment. I don't know if anyone can provide those to me to allow people to vote. Okay, whilst I'm waiting for that detail and also for the questions coming through, I'm going to take advantage of my position as chair to ask some questions. Okay, so I've now got the detail, thank you. So considering the smart city solutions that the Sharing Cities initiative is prioritising, which scenarios are top of mind for you? The options are: number 1, energy management; 2, building retrofit; 3, e-mobility; 4, smart lampposts; 5, urban sharing or urban data platform. So if the audience can give some thought to each of those, we'll get the results through in a few minutes and we'll share those with you. Meantime, having been thrown in at the deep end with that last minute poll, I'm going to take advantage of my position as chair to ask some tricky questions and put our panel on the spot. First of all, James, from a Microsoft perspective, what is your approach to partnering with solution providers and local and regional government organisations? We've talked over the last hour, there's plenty of technology solutions out there, but actually spreading the word and getting people to collaborate seems to be one of the main barriers. What are you doing in order to facilitate those conversations with public sector organisations and bring them to the table?
Yeah, absolutely. So from our perspective, first of all, from a partnering point of view, we absolutely engage together with our partners. If you think about Microsoft's role, we are providing and continually iterating on a cloud platform, that platform being what we call Microsoft Azure. So leveraging that Azure cloud, we then really do rely on a set of strategic partners to help us bring that additional level of industry expertise and capabilities, which are driving more relevant topics with our customers. And so, for example, we will typically, in the case of city councils, jointly attend workshops and briefings and presentations to talk about not only the specific smart city focused solutions, but also then talking more about the value of data and data strategy, and obviously cloud platform capabilities. And so really our approach is always to do that in a joined up fashion. And I think if anything, what we strive to try and do is, of course, we are quite often, thinking about the topic of today, being asked to help support specific point solutions or specific pilots. And actually what we strive to do more of is to take a step back and actually think more holistically about the citizen data. And then, of course, what are those solutions that are feeding in and providing those different data points? But absolutely a joint approach. So hopefully that helps to answer the question.
I think it does, but I'm going to come back to you and put you on the spot, because you'll recall those people who were there this morning will remember the stats that I mentioned in terms of the number of local authorities across Scotland, England, Northern Ireland and Wales. There are different solutions out there for different cities. And I guess the question to you is the extent to which the private sector has the responsibility to try and manage expectations, diversity of approaches, diversity of solutions. Because I think part of the issue why we keep on reinventing the wheel with all of these pilots is people don't know what's going on elsewhere in the country. To what extent is the onus on the private sector to say, okay, we have an overview of the entirety of the sector. Here's what we think can help you in your particular geographical area?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I think certainly we're, of course, getting lots of great insights from the engagements that we have, but we also see a lot of common themes across those different engagements. And I think the biggest area where not only hopefully us as an organization can play a role, but also in our engagements with those local or regional government cities and councils is actually to play an orchestration role and almost think about it in terms of, well, how can we best bring all of these different cities and councils together to help them really discuss and share learnings rather than make the same mistakes or spend the same amount of money on similar projects to get pilot learnings and feedback, etc. So I think if I was to fast forward to what would amazing look like from today, it would really be, how are we bringing together those different decision makers to actually think about, okay, well, if they're piloting lampposts in, I don't know, in one of the London boroughs, that they're sharing those learnings with a number of other cities across the country and across the United Kingdom, to be able to then articulate, okay, well, here's our key learnings. And of course, the Sharing Cities program has been fantastic in helping to share all of that best practice. But really, how do we help to remove more costs out of the equation, so that instead of having multiple boroughs or city councils all piloting the same things, testing the same things, but instead there's just this healthy, vibrant sharing and learning system? Because I think that's the only way that not only will we help adoption rates accelerate, but also to save a lot of those precious budgets.
That's great to get your insight on that. Thank you. I mean, I guess that leads on to a follow-on question, and maybe one for Jason in the first instance, given his involvement in the Sharing Cities project. You've talked previously about the smart booklets and the smart city playbooks, Jason, but we can't forget that the Sharing Cities project was effectively funded from the EU 2020 initiative with 25 million euros coming from there. And I guess my worry in all of this is great sharing the expertise, great sharing the knowledge, but fundamentally there's funding and it has to come from somewhere. And with Brexit on the horizon, what's your take on how we can facilitate some of these projects?
It's a different question. I think most smart city projects in the UK certainly are supported by some form of funding that sits outside the normal local authority budget. And that's a big barrier that we need to overcome. And, there isn't a short answer to it. What I do know is that, the playbooks, the output of Sharing Cities do provide some business models that demonstrate, sustainable funding models. So that's positive. You know, from the platform side, as I said, you know, one thing that that we've done as an organisation is to create an affordable out-of-the-box solution that, you know, is off the shelf as near as you ever can be for this type of thing, and so it doesn't require any additional development, because again, that's been a bit of a problem to data platforms in the past. Is you'd be given a Lego kit and you still have to spend vast amounts of time and energy actually creating something that works. You know, if we go through, you know, the lists around e-mobility, EV, I think, you know, that area is very much gaining ground in terms of sustainable business models. So, you know, I don't think you need really to be looking at pilots from that point of view. Smart lighting, certainly from, you know, the control of the lighting itself. Again, that's now baked in to most LED replacement programs. You know, if you look at the further smart aspects of putting in the, you know, the air quality monitors, the Wi-Fi, the CCTV onto you know, smart lighting, that's still a little bit of a grey area in terms of what the, you know, the business case and how that would be funded. So it's kind of on a case-by-case basis, and you know, I think we're still trying to find the answer to, you know, how does a city become smart, particularly how is that funded, you know, in an economically sustainable way. What I can say is that, you know, a lot of European countries are putting a lot of government funding into this area to prime the pump. And, you know, we mentioned H2020, those big programs. You know, if the UK is going to keep up, you know, there needs to be some equivalent in the post-Brexit era.
I agree with that. I mean, it's an enormous topic, and one which, if we had time, I'd be happy to dive into. But fundamentally, one of the biggest challenges for most cities is you know, the capex requirement for some of this stuff. The fact that, you know, liquidity isn't an issue. There's plenty of money out there, and certainly the pension funds and the big commercial banks and even the, you know, the smaller investors in the market are keen to help. But part of it is the dialogue to try and encourage the pipeline of projects, whether that's through aggregation or identifying geographical areas that people can invest in. And I think, you know, the financial sector definitely has a role to play in all of this. Before we move on, I've got the results of the poll, which is marvelous. And so in terms of the scenarios that are top of mind for our audience, some interesting stats for you to digest, and I'd be interested in getting some reactions from our panel. So in terms of priorities, we've got energy management topping the poll at 50%, then urban sharing and urban data platforms coming in at 21%, smart lampposts and building retrofit, joint third place at 14%, and remarkably, e-mobility, no one has gone for. I'm quite interested in the panel's views. If I can come to James, because I know this was your idea, so I'm going to put you back on the spot to get your immediate reaction to how the audience have voted and how you feel that fits with what you've seen.
Sorry, yes, coming off mute there. Well, I must admit, I think the energy management topic is such a hot topic for us at the moment. I mean, when you look at some of those statistics around areas such as buildings contribute to 40% of consumption worldwide, that of course is a very compelling statistic. If you overlay that with elements such as the European Commission's Near Zero Energy Building Initiative, which comes into force at the end of this year, you can start to see that there is not only a real appetite to address energy management certainly from a building perspective, but also when you think about the energy consumption that buildings really have, and that resulting impact on the environment. You know, those are hugely compelling statistics where actually there are solutions and services which can absolutely help to meet some of those requirements from an energy perspective. I think, you know, some of the examples that Andy shared earlier are absolutely perfect in terms of not only addressing things like building energy management, but also more specifically things like district energy sharing, which again is a hot topic at the moment. And certainly we are being pulled into more and more conversations, not only with local and regional government authorities, but also with housing associations on how we help to enable those types of scenarios. So hopefully that helps.
No, very helpful. I'd also like to come to Andy Dyke and get his take on it, because obviously you've spent some time talking about intelligent buildings, and you know, I'd like you to comment on the voting, but also in the context of how life has changed, because the majority of people at the moment aren't back in their offices. And what does that mean in the context of COVID-19 and how an intelligent building is going to look going forward? So 2 thoughts from you, please.
Yeah, I'll start with the latter. It's an interesting subject area. Discussions with James the other day, we were saying no one wants to be profiteering from COVID-19, but you know, there's a need now for operational policies to change. The process of businesses taking a view that they will operate in an agile working nature to really push the maximum use and utilization of their workplace, you know, has had to completely flip to understanding who works where and auditing that process. So we're seeing a lot of clients now seeing the benefit of digitization in the building to support some of those new use cases that have come into play. So, you know, auditing desk booking rather than running open desk policies, so that they can audit cleaning processes in line with different users. That's a huge play. Checking how and when people are due to arrive in a building, so they can police the congestion in shared facility areas such as lifts or changing areas or bike store areas. You know, these are huge challenges that, you know, 6-8 months ago were not even considered as a problem. So there's been lots and lots of change, and digital can really help that amongst with the good policy change, but digital is certainly there to support that. I think the interesting aspect, as with any poll, going back to the first part of that question, is that obviously there's always a number of interesting areas and topics that people aren't aware of how digital can support benefits. You were surprised at the mobility aspect coming in low. Sometimes people aren't aware of how digital can support the change of the world that we live in. And people do tend to drift to the topic areas that they're more familiar with. And energy management is a clear one. James has outlined a fantastic set of numbers there that show a compelling case. Energy management is a really strong area that we've worked very closely with a number of clients over the years to drive down. Typically, we're 20-25% energy reduction against buildings that are an existing building stock through the fact that they're operating inefficiently or weren't commissioned properly in the first place. But when you overlay that with new buildings and district schemes and try and drive that sort of net zero approach using data and using IoT and big data schemes, there's so many opportunities, Claire, that are open to be benefited from platforms such as Azure.
Brilliant. Gary, can I ask for your thoughts on this, particularly from the lighting perspective and the poll that's talking about smart lampposts being in at 14%?
I think it's actually interesting, because I think, again, it actually shows the dilemma to a certain extent, because actually, if you think about it, the lighting and let's say smart lampposts or smart lighting, the reality is we impact the energy. We can impact mobility. If you can't see where you're going, you're not going to be able to know where you're going. And also in terms of sharing data. So in terms of that sort of urban data platform, we have the ability to include, millimeter wave 5G antennas, lots of different sensors within the thing. So I think this comes back to that sort of argument of sort of like, we're in this sort of silo approach of different types of solutions, or actually looking at a platform approach in terms of the products and the things that we actually share. And to slightly disagree with Jason, but if you look at it in a lot of the local authorities, the reality is we're sort of 65 to 70% adopted in LED in the UK, certainly from a local authority perspective. But actually, we're only about 30% on control. And actually, control still seems to be an afterthought. It's get the lighting done, then move over to thinking about the control. And that's one of the arguments that we lobby with. We spend a lot of time lobbying and a lot of time promoting to local authorities to try to line their journey to say, why do you want to do something 3 times? Because we can help create that network, we can help reduce the energy even further, and we can help provide you with those data streams. And when you look at the building part as well, in reality, we provide lighting that goes into buildings, but we also are the journey to the office. If we can help in that journey, help then obviously with partners such as Intercomp in terms of providing how parking solutions then can find the right place for you in order to make your journey to work seamless. I think lighting is really a host. And it really should be seen as much more of an ecosystem than just providing light. And my last comment is, we sort of, while somebody owns the light, we all share the light. We can walk under a light, and actually it's for all of us to enjoy. It's not actually something that we actually physically own, the light being sent out. It's something all of us can experience. So again, I think lighting is already in a very much a sharing environment, and let us help to drive that partnership, to drive those different sort of stack layers to a certain extent, to provide something that creates that sort of interoperable and open environment. We're widely deployed. We're in lots of different types of environment. We're just not being used in the right way is the honest point, and that reflects in the poll. Very interesting.
I love your expression, we can all enjoy and share the light. You're sounding almost evangelical. I'm expecting a glow to form around your head. It's quite remarkable. Giordano, can I come to you, please? You've obviously seen these stats, which are principally, I guess, UK reactions to priorities. And you're coming at it, having heard about Treviso, which sounds absolutely remarkable. And my takeaway from today is social virtuosity, which I think is fantastic as an expression. How do these results compare to the position in Italy and what the priorities are there? Have you had any cause to investigate where the priorities lie in all of the jurisdictions within Italy?
Yeah, well, during this last month, of course, everything changed, concerning the smart parking solutions in terms of how municipalities are looking toward the opportunity of changing or supporting a new type of mobility, also connecting the smart parking services with the mobility itself. Right before, instead, there was a huge attention also considering the cases that were growing approximately around Europe, and especially in Italy. Treviso was also a great case in which they try to combine the mobility part and the parking side. So probably also one of the first time in which they connected the two words, showing up that the two things are extremely connected. And if you can optimize the way people are parking, you can even optimize the people are moving toward the city. So the problem, which is quite huge pretty much in all of the Italian city center, the thing that most of the historical city have this tiny city center in which everyone wants to get in order to reach the center places. It must be solved in somehow, and it cannot be solved with things that are impacting so much on the environment, such as other buildings around the city center, also disrupting what the beauty of a city could be. That was pretty much all.
No, that's helpful to understand. And can I ask, I guess, forgive me being cheeky for asking, but obviously Treviso sounds hugely impressive. In terms of the Italians as a country, how many other Italian cities are looking to follow what has been achieved in Treviso? I've been to a number of Italian cities and the parking situation is a nightmare. So I'm keen to understand if that solution has been deployed in Rome and other places.
Yeah, I mean, there are some like cities which somehow like we are using, of course, we are showcasing Treviso because it is active since 2010. So it is a real case from a long period. Then, of course, we always have to face with what politics thinks over this type of long-term project, because a smart parking solution, it somehow come out, like the benefits come out after maybe couple of years, 3 years, 4 years. And it is a long-term benefits on the environment and over the economy and over the society and so on. So maybe also what we have experienced is that sometimes it is difficult to find also someone who is willing to have a long-term project, not only, for example, for his own administration, but also for the ones that gonna come up afterward. That is pretty much maybe a problem, if that was sort of answering the questions you said before.
No, that's great. Thank you so much for your insight, something that I would never otherwise be able to get the answer to. We've got some questions in from the audience, which I'd like to share with the panel. The first is, I get the impression from several speakers that tech is no longer the obstacle to smart cities. Do speakers feel that this is getting through to the folks that make decisions? The point being that this individual has seen so many news items on new technology being demonstrated when it's actually not new technology at all. I guess this comes back to the conversation, James, you and I had at the start about the onus being on private sector, or question, should the onus be on the private sector to share the successes, shine a light on those things that we know work and spread the word, because otherwise how are cities going to know that it's out there? And I guess the point is there a central repository for all of this great information and success that we can actually share with all of these cities?
Yeah, I mean, it's a brilliant question from the audience, and I think the additional context you add to that, Claire, kind of says a couple of things to me. One is that, you know, I really agree from a question perspective that that a lot of the technology is there today, for sure. Is that well adopted in some scenarios? Yes, absolutely. And we've seen some great examples today around that. But is it getting through to the decision makers? It feels like it is, because of the increasing amount of conversations that we are being pulled into. But of course, adoption and a lot of the smart city concepts and ideas have been around for a long time. But it feels like it's increasingly becoming a more important priority, particularly as we look at things like decarbonisation, renewable energy, sustainability, etc. So I don't know if that really helps to answer the question. I would probably lean on some of the panel to help add some additional context there in terms of the conversations they're having with their customers today. But certainly we are finding just this significant increase in dialogue with local and regional government organisations at the moment.
I mean, I would.
Yep.
Sorry.
Please crack on. No, crack on. That's great.
I would say, you know, I'd echo James' experiences that, you know, we are in a lot of conversations, and, you know, as businesses, we are doing our best to push out the messages. And I think, you know, one of the key messages, takeaways from this session to be is, I think the technology is mature in many of these areas. It is the financial aspects that need addressing. And, you know, a lot of that interest comes from, you know, officers within cities, you know, people that are at the coalface that have to deliver services, and you know, they've got a bit of spare time or they're interested. What we don't see so much of really is interest from the budget holders and the decision makers in cities. And you know, there's a bit of a gap between you know, the people that could use the tools to create and deliver better services, and the people that hold the budgets. And it's a difficult barrier to cross. I mean, I've been working in this industry since about 2012, 2013, and it's a problem, bigger problem today as it was back then. It's improving, but I think it's still an issue that we need to resolve. Stunned silence.
I agree with you, Jason. I mean, I guess I come at this before I ask the other panel members to contribute. I come at this from a project finance background, so I've walked the walk in terms of trying to get public sector on board to try and get them to deploy energy efficiency measures across cities, and we've been successful with the Green Loan, which was a green investment bank product, which was launched a number of years ago, pre-Macquarie taking over GIB. That was a public sector financial instrument which allowed public sector bodies to draw down a loan, deploy energy efficient street lighting across their estate. And the beauty of it was that it employed a spend to save model, so that as you deployed your technology, you made savings on your electricity bills, which would then be used, those savings would be used to repay the loan. So a bit of a no-brainer. We managed to get 5 projects deployed across the UK, across Scotland and England. I think the last one was London, Barking and Dagenham. But the big issue, and I'm being very candid with you and all of the audience here, the big issue that we had was you would get chief executives going, this is marvelous, what a fantastic solution, and we're going to make savings which allow us to repay the debt. But there was no internal champion within the public sector organisations because of constraints on budgets. There was no champion that could help facilitate and make it happen. So you were dealing with different departments, the finance department going, well, why should we borrow that money when we can use SALEX or PWLB as funding resources? Why should we think about a different innovation in terms of financing this as a solution? You then had project managers going, well, in terms of my to-do list, it's number 23. And I will get back to you. And so part of the issue with this, I don't disagree that the technology and the solutions are there, the finance is there, but it's actually bringing it all together and making the conversations happen. I can see, Andy, you're nodding your head. Do you agree? Please tell me you agree.
No, I do. And interestingly, because we work more heavily in the private sector space, but there's even the same challenges. It's the same model really. When you talk about digitization, digitization is a thin layer that will affect many people when you consider a wider project scheme. So in buildings, you start talking about bringing a standard data model into a building that would then facilitate multiple outcomes for the users, trying to get all the individual stakeholders to agree and join forces in that approach, and then all put their budget to the table, I suppose, to help contribute towards that common goal is a significant challenge. And I can see those same challenges being present in the cityscape scenario. That it's not necessarily going to be, it's something new. So someone needs to champion it, as you rightly point out, and that's exactly the same in the building environment, in the private sector. But equally, it's serving multiple outcomes, benefits to multiple people, multiple areas and budgets within that demise. That means that it needs someone to get their hands around it, put it together, knock heads together, say this does make sense. Everyone has their independent view on an ROI or a benefit or a meeting of an agenda against this model. We need to all collaborate, and unless everyone's united and pulling along those same tracks, we end up falling to the side of these proof of concept trials that don't break through the door. So I do totally agree with you, Claire.
Oh, marvellous. That's always a winner. I'm conscious of time. We've got 5 minutes left before I have to wrap up. So I'm going to do that big picture question and ask each of our panelists to give me their views. What do you think is the single biggest thing that's needed to change behaviour to move away from pilots? Because there's tons of them out there and they're still happening. So what is the single biggest thing that needs to change behaviour? James, if I can come to you first.
Yeah, I think for actually very much in line with what we closed out on in this morning's session, in that it is very much about sharing and partnering across different government entities and organizations. The power that would bring in terms of not only accelerating cities' ability to adopt solutions and improve citizens' lives and services, I think is unquestionable there. So yeah, I think that for me, to stop waffling, the number one thing would just be driving alignment across different city and governmental organisation decision makers.
Thank you. Jason, can I come to you next, please?
I think I build on that theme. I think trust is equally as important. You know, trust between public and private sectors, between smaller businesses that are innovative and can move quickly, but then often lack the, the capacity, the track record to, to be impactful with large projects. I think to go alongside sharing, you have to have that trust, and we need to create forums to do that. And I think that's why, some of these Innovate UK programs and the EU ones, where you often get small businesses and large businesses working together with local authorities, those are really good models for engendering sharing and building trust, and also getting over that barrier that you identified, Claire, between, the technology works, the money's there somewhere, but how do we kind of, break that glass ceiling?
Excellent. Gary, do you have anything to add from your perspective?
Yeah, I think the big thing we see is it's the management of risk. We see a big thing where so much risk is sort of put into the standard going forward. It's like, well, we're experts to a certain extent. You have to trust. There's lots of evidence. It's not like there's no evidence out there. So I agree with Jason in terms of that trust, but we seem to define everything by the fact of how do I offload my risk, minimize any comeback to me as a customer. And of course, what that does, that builds things where you're building for something today with a long warranty, for argument's sake, but it's not actually building a sustainable platform. And I come back to that statement I said earlier on. We see lots of motion, but actually we don't see lots of action. So the thing is, the pilots is what's the motion, but I think the action is the key thing there, and never confuse motion for action. There's lots of examples of that. And I think the key thing from our side is really that lobbying, is that showing actually how can we align to the funding. So most of our job is actually find out what the funding is. How does the city want to grow its funding, and align the schemes and align the projects to the funding to get the best impact. If you've got 300,000 of funding, there's no point me trying to convince them that I can get 1 million. The reality is, what can we deliver on that 300,000 with the partners, and how can that be the starting point to actually start that journey going along with the vision that the customer wants to deliver. And that seems to be where we're getting the best impact, driving the momentum forward. And the more partners you bring in, the more trust that gets built. The only thing I will say, and we're probably guilty of it ourselves, is that it's really tough sometimes to step outside your own core agenda, because you've got sort of like 5 partners all fighting for their core agenda. And that, I think, is on us a little bit to sort of make sure. And that's why events like this allow us to do that bit more sharing. So.
Excellent. You've got 30 seconds, Giordano. What can you change?
No, I completely agree with what have been said. So partnership and trustness, also among other players into the market. So even, for example, for us, it is extremely important to partner also with potential other players that are providing maybe part of some services that we can integrate it into platforms and deliver it together. Also, I wouldn't exclude the thing, for example, for us to have a pilot or to have a small implementation. It is a good thing if the step between the pilot and then the real implementation would be quicker. Then that would be a really good point, because even in a short time we can understand through a pilot then what are the advantages for a solution. But then the decision making should be faster.
Thank you, Giordano. And lastly, Andy, Can you condense this into 15 seconds?
I'll do my best. Standardizing and mandating a data strategy that's UK wide. If we had every smart city scheme looking at repeatable use cases and having a structure that we can all feed into, and starting to have that dragging along micro projects in cities or deployments to feed into that schema, I think we'll see some terrific advantages in comparing the benefits of smart city solutions throughout the UK. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, and thank you for being so succinct. Everyone, we have literally run out of time, and I'm really sorry to say that, as I'd love to keep going with the Q&A questions. You probably gathered it's a bit of a pet topic for me. In wrapping up, I'd like to thank you for your attention and for contributing to the debate this afternoon. Thank you especially to all of our panel members for their insights and observations. And finally, I'm going to take advantage of my chair position again. And I'm going to make a call to action, probably in a far less eloquent manner than Greta would. But if you feel as strongly as we do about the issues we've covered today and want to contribute to making a difference, then please do get in touch with me or any of the other panel members. I think they're all on LinkedIn. We need to ensure that the right people at the right level, both public sector and private sector, are having the right conversations, and collaboration in all of this is key. We have to move away from debate and discussion into implementation, as we're running out of time. Sectors need to come together. Yes, the tech sector, absolutely, but also financial sector, energy sector, real estate, construction, and public sectors, amongst others. And we want and need to facilitate that collaboration. And I think I'm putting words into the mouths of my panel members, but I think they're all up for that challenge. This is going to take a massive effort, and if you want to be part of that, then genuinely we want to hear from you. Greta Thunberg talked about the ongoing irresponsible behaviour of industry and decision makers being regarded as remembered in history as one of the greatest failures of humankind. So I'd like to see if we can change that. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you everyone for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.